Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for today's announcement. My name is Derek Rowland. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Communications to the Honourable Lisa MacLeod, Ontario's Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. I want to thank you for joining us for today's virtual announcement. Just before we get started, I will just say for any media on the line, we will be taking questions following the announcement. If you do have a question, we'll be running this very similar to the Premier's podium announcements, one question, one follow-up. I encourage you to either use the raise your hand function to indicate that you'd like to ask a question, or you could put your name and outlet in the chat box below and we'll individually unmute you to ask your question. To begin today's announcement, I'll turn it over to Minister MacLeod for her remarks. Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much, Derek, and thanks all for joining us here today. I'm very grateful that you are here to talk about a very important issue in our nation's capital, but also across our entire province, and that is the human trafficking issue that we have been confronting for years in the province of Ontario. Before I get into my remarks, I'd like to introduce two people who will be speaking as I follow. The first will be Cynthia Bland, who is a friend of mine from Nepean. She's the founder and CEO of a very important victim-led, survivor-led human trafficking support system called Voice Found. In the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, we fund her through the Ontario Trillium Foundation. I've also dropped off PPE in the last week and a half to her to support the victims as well as her support staff. I'm also joined by my friend Colin Morrison. Many of you will know Colin as the general manager of our Ottawa Embassy Suites Hotel in downtown Ottawa, but also as the chair of the Ottawa Gatineau Hotel Association and a strong advocate for our sectors who have been hit first, hardest, and will take the longest to recover in this sad pandemic situation. Colin's here today because hotels have become a hub of activity for human trafficking, which is why my ministry, alongside the Ministry of Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, brought forward new anti-human trafficking legislation this week that will build off of our $307 million commitment to support vulnerable girls and women. This emanated from legislation early on during my opposition days with the Honourable Laurie Scott, who brought forward something called the Girl Next Door Act to highlight the sex trafficking that is happening across Ontario. When I was Women's Minister in the previous portfolio, I led a national conversation with the Minister of Status of Women federally, as well as my provincial and territorial colleagues on this issue, and also had the ability to travel to the United Nations to speak on behalf of Canada about sex trafficking with the Vatican. And so this work is really important. I call this Ontario's dirty little secret. And I say so because for many years, we really haven't seen this national conversation that's required. And girls as young as 11 have been victimized as a result of being preyed upon and groomed into sex trafficking. And so if you don't think it's happening here, think again. It's happening at Bayshore. It's happened to girls who've gone to Algonquin College. It could happen to any child in any community across Ontario. And that's why we are bringing measures in place that will support this legislation and these vulnerable women. More broadly speaking, and I can speak to the legislation with my colleagues, we'll be supporting a long-term provincial response to human trafficking and emphasizing that all Ontarians have a role to play in combating human trafficking. We're going to be strengthening the ability of children's aid societies and law enforcement to protect exploited children. We'll be supporting more survivors and the people who support them in obtaining restraining orders against traffickers with specific consideration for Indigenous survivors. We'll be increasing the government's ability to collect non-personal data to better understand and respond to human trafficking. And we'll be providing law enforcement officers with more tools to locate victims and charge traffickers by increasing penalties for traffickers who interfere with a child in the care of a children's aid society. We'll clarify how and when police services can access information from hotel and guest registries to help deter trafficking and identify and locate victims, while establishing regulation making authority to include other types of accommodation providers, and will require companies that advertise sexual services to have a dedicated contact to support investigations into suspected human trafficking. Now, with respect to the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, our hotel, motel, and resorts, as well as short-term accommodations, can often lead to a place where a child, a girl, or a young woman has been trafficked. And that's why we're involved. And that's why it's so important that we have our hoteliers involved in this legislation. We are known as a hub for human trafficking, and hotels, including motels and resorts, are a key component of traffickers' activities. These facilities offer accommodation to move victims while providing privacy and anonymity to traffickers who must relocate for operations, often to evade law enforcement. So the Hotel Registration and Guest Act will be replaced by a new Accommodation Sector Registration of Guests Act that will provide an opportunity to modernize the framework, including definitions of the sector on what is based to look like today, and provide clear and consistent requirements to support law enforcement to deter human trafficking in the accommodation sector. This new legislation would require authority to enhance the information collected in guest registries, establish a length of time the registries must be maintained, and prescribe other accommodation providers which are not currently part of the scope of BHA. So this is really building out at a time when we know that the industry is really evolving, and making sure that we can provide greater protections for these women. And again, we'll just specify how and when police can access information included in the guest registries in order to support human trafficking investigations through a production order in government, in non-extension of circumstances, and codification of police power to urgently demand to review information without a production order under extended circumstances. So I'm just grateful that our hotel operators across Ontario have supported this, and those who do not comply could see a fine of up to $5,000 and a possible term of imprisonment. So again, this is very much a very important piece of legislation to protect the lives and livelihoods of young women and children across this great province, and right here at home in the city of Ottawa. And as the minister responsible for heritage, sport, tourism, and culture industries, I'm proud that our sectors have stepped up on this very important issue. So with that, I'll turn it over now to Cynthia Bland, the founder and CEO of VoiceBound, for a few remarks, and then to Colin Morrison, who is our chair of the Ottawa Gatineau Hotel Association and the general manager of Ottawa's Embassy Suites. Thanks very much. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words today. VoiceFound is a survivor-led charity that provides services and support for survivors of human trafficking all along their journey to overcome what's been done to them without their consent. This includes crisis and long-term care, primary and preventative health care, and peer support. I do want to acknowledge that my remarks today include input from my team, some of whom have lived experience. This is our collective voice. Children and youth are far too frequently victimized. And over the years, and particularly the past 6 in the work that we've been doing, we've supported hundreds of survivors. And our own data is showing that the majority are between the ages of 15 to 19. Many are younger, and many are youth in care. We're happy to see the additional steps being made to further support them, including increased penalties for traffickers who interfere with a child who's in the care of Children's Aid Society. When a victim comes forward or is identified, it's critical that the right support for that person be available immediately. It's a really, really complex crime, and it has many moving pieces that require collaboration and coordination across many sectors. One of those, of course, is the hospitality sector, and we applaud the government for their commitment to raising awareness in hotels and in the sector, and providing the necessary tools to aid in police investigations. It takes many years and many resources to support survivors as they exit and rebuild their lives. Yesterday was Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And, while some may question the effectiveness of awareness days, I really want to challenge you, and I want to add this, and that is that human trafficking, childhood sexual abuse, and exploitation are clandestine crimes. Awareness is the first step in building knowledge and bringing them out of the darkness. Every single person in every community has the ability to take action and do something. And the government's providing more tools to fight these crimes. So, how can you help? I think it's important that we all get educated. When more you know, then share that knowledge with other people, and then support organizations that are on the front lines. We're really busy. The proposed legislation is significant, and it demonstrates Ontario's commitment to its anti-human trafficking strategy. I have to say we're really proud to see Ontario taking these significant steps to protect children and youth and to support victims and survivors. Thank you for the opportunity to say these words. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cynthia. Colin, may we turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Good morning. The hotel industry across Canada continues to play a significant role in stopping human trafficking by recognizing warning signs and by having protocols in place to report suspicious activity. This legislation will assist hotels in working with authorities when these situations arise and will ultimately provide better protection for the victims. Our team members have a wide range of duties and areas of focus each day. This means that they have the potential to come in contact with both traffickers and victims. Human trafficking is not always easy to spot. However, there are clues. Some clues are obvious. An older man or woman checking in with a younger female. The young person's appearance is not indicative of their age, or many visitors coming and going from a particular hotel room. Some clues are less obvious. Rooms where guests decline housekeeping services for long periods of time, or consistent do not disturb signs on the doors, together with demands for extra towels or new bedding. Hotel team members are trained to look for these clues and others to report instances of these instances to their supervisors or management. Hotels have protocols in place to report suspicious activities to the authorities. Ottawa is fortunate to have a human trafficking unit who respond to issues not with lights and sirens, but with concern in caring for the victim and a need to deal with the offenders. This legislation will assist both the authorities and the hotels in working together to provide better protections for victims of human trafficking and ultimately for all our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. And just before we take questions and comments, it's always important, and when I was the women's minister, I said this quite frequently, it's important for strong women to support vulnerable women, but it's likely more important for strong men like yourself to stand up for those vulnerable women. So I want to commend you for your leadership and for that of your organization and your company. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Colin and Cynthia, for your remarks. We'll go now to the phones for any questions. Just a reminder, if there's any media on the line looking to ask a question, you can either use the raise your hand function, or if you'd like to put your name and outlet into the chat box below, we can individually unmute you to ask your question. I'll give it about 30 seconds here for any questions that may come in. Okay, Minister, there does not look to be any questions at this time.
Okay, well, I really want to thank the media outlets for joining us here today. As Cynthia said, awareness is absolutely critical and key, and to Colin's point, looking for those signs. It's absolutely important for us as citizens to protect these young girls from the scourge of criminal activity. So thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Colin, and thank you, Cynthia. We shall see you again, hopefully soon in person.
Absolutely.